will be recording the session.
Yes.
Super. So my pleasure to introduce Andy Rogers. Andy, thanks very much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome, John. Yeah, no problem at all.
For the record, Andy is National Sport Development Consultant for Sport New Zealand, responsible for the Coach Developer Program in New Zealand, and has been one of the trainers at NCDA with, I guess it was cohort 4 and cohort 5. So, Andy, you're totally familiar with what we're doing at NCDA and with the new cohort that's coming in. We really felt it would be very beneficial to get a look into a fully developed, it's always developing, but a experienced coach developer system. So that's really what we're here for, to hear from you. And I would invite people to ask questions. We're a fairly small group, so we can have a question period and people can come in on the discussion. And that certainly includes the mentors as well as any of the participants. The session's being recorded so that people from other time zones can join in at their leisure. So let me turn it over to Andy.
Great, thanks, John. And I'll just reiterate that point. Welcome, everyone, and fully into getting a conversation going here. So please don't hold back on the questions. Getting some interaction going will be really positive. That way you won't have to hear my voice for the next 50 odd minutes. So what I'll do is I've got some slides. See if I can get the right ones up here. I think it's this one. We'll see how we go with this one. See if we can get that started. There we go. So when John approached me to share the New Zealand system, I thought the first thing that came to mind, and this is what I'd really encourage anyone that's leading a system to sit down and just think through. Probably the biggest question is around context, and everyone's context is a little bit different. So what works in New Zealand is going to be different to what works in Singapore, which is different to what works in Bhutan. So I'm going to share a little bit about the New Zealand system and our journey and some of our insights, some of our mistakes, some of our things that we've learned, and obviously some of the things we think we've done well. But I will preface that to everyone that this is how I've shaped it the Kiwi way. Of course, there's some common themes in here, but there's also some real unique things that are quite distinctive to New Zealand. And that's the point I'd like to start with is context is key. So I've started with my little friend there, the Kiwi bird. I was having a chat to Saori and Shuri about the Kiwi bird and just asked what sort of stands out. It's a real icon for New Zealand, and we talk about this is sort of how New Zealanders are known, the Kiwi. So what's distinctive about that bird that you're looking at right there? If you can't tell, it has no wings. It can't fly. It also has no tail, but it's also nocturnal. So it spends its time in the dark, comes out at dark. And a lot of what it does is about protection, about being unique. It's held as a real treasure in our cultural custom by the Maori people. In fact, the feathers are held as a treasure. So it's a very, very special bird. It likes to do things different, and it's very unique. And it sort of epitomizes some of the things we like to believe in New Zealand in terms of it's an underdog. It needs to hide from people and do things very different and quite special. So that's the Kiwi bird. In terms of the session, what I thought I'd do is break it up into 3 sort of sections. One, just a little bit around the New Zealand context and why I think context is pretty important. Then move into, I guess, our journey and where it all started and how we've built our system. And then sort of third section I've called insights to action. So some of our learning, I've got a little case study from one of our NSOs and past actually participant from the NCDA program, and then share some of our future thinking as well. At any stage, jump in, but we might pause after each section, John, and just see if there's any sort of themes coming through, if that sounds good.
Yeah, perfect.
So a little bit about New Zealand. We're an island. We're surrounded by water. We're a small country, about 4.5 million people. That's our coat of arms. And this is important to us for a number of reasons. As you can see, there's two distinctive cultures there. So we're a bicultural country. You can see the European lady on the left with the New Zealand flag, and you can see the Māori chief on the right. So we're popularly known in New Zealand as a bicultural country. If you look at the flag, the crest in the middle there, you'll see a number of symbols that epitomizes New Zealand. We've got the ships and the sailing, so obviously water, and then around the outside, industrious. So we've got a lot of agriculture, a lot of farming, a lot of mining, and in essence, we're a hardworking country. So why is that important? Because I think you really need to understand who you are, where you've come from, and who your people are when you're designing programs to fit your specific need. I'm going to just drop a little bit deeper into the cultural side of things and some of the reference to our coach developer program now, and some of the concepts that are very, very important to us in our programs. And if you came to see our program, we believe that these customs or cultures would play out through our program. So these are Māori cultural concepts. The 6 of them that are quite important to us, and I'll run through from sort of top left across the screen and then the bottom 3 as well. So whanaungatanga is basically about, in New Zealand, it's very important to be connected and feel part of a family and a real sense of belonging. So it's a custom that throughout all the work we do, everyone is feeling joined up, feeling a part of something, and I guess a sense of something that's bigger than themselves. Now that's a really important concept for us, and that runs across all the work we do, and specifically into our coach developer program. Poheri, the one with the fist pumping. In New Zealand, custom, really important custom in terms of how we welcome people. So on our program, if you came to a 3-day residential program, we'd spend some time going through a welcome, a poheri, in terms of how we welcome the guests on, how we acknowledge the land that we're sitting on, and some of the history behind it. Inside that poheri is a pepeha, and that's the way that we introduce ourselves. Now, some of you may have heard, I know Cam probably has heard Tammy introduce herself in Māori using her pepeha. Basically, when we're connecting with people in New Zealand, it's really, really important to understand where you've come from and how that shaped you. So in New Zealand, we introduce ourselves a lot by saying the land that we came from. An important icon is the mountain that you live next to. Another important icon is the river or the lake that you live next to. And then you talk about the boat that your family came to New Zealand on when they traveled here. And then you talk about your connection to the local community. And through that, the big thing that comes up is connections, and people start to make connections. So if you, again, came to a coach developer program in New Zealand, on day 1, which is quite unique to New Zealand, and it may not happen in other countries, is we may spend 2 hours, maybe more sometimes, in that first introduction process. Now, some would say, whoa, what a waste of time, 2 hours, we could be doing a lot of work in that. Well, in New Zealand's context, if we don't do that correctly and appropriate in the first instance, we lose a lot of people over the next 2.5 days anyway. So it's a really, really important custom for us. down to the bottom three, ACO is a concept around reciprocal learning. So the picture depicts in that picture, you sort of can't really tell who the leader is and who the participants are. And this is a really important concept, again, in New Zealand, is that we learn through shared meaning. As a teacher, we can teach, but we also learn. And as a participant, we can teach and we also learn. So this concept of being part of new growth and learning is really, really important. Mana Manaki is basically about upholding the respect and dignity of people. Everyone's unique when they come in. And this concept is about building what we call mana, a person's presence and respect. So really important in conversations and how you approach and speak to people. And then the final one, again, we talked about our opening, how we might open a coach developer workshop. Just as important is what we call the poparaki, which is the closing of our workshops. And this is where everyone, both the guests and the hosts, have an opportunity to share their experience over the past, in our case, 3 days, and be able to support and back each other up along the way. So a really, really important part in closing our workshops. So from a context and a cultural perspective, some key themes that are really, really important to New Zealand. And I guess what I'd throw out to the new cohort coming in, as you think about building your unique programs and your unique contexts, what's different about your country or your organization that you need to take into consideration before you even start the process of what content might look like. John, I'm just going to pause there for a minute and open up. You may have some follow-up questions, or we can open up to the group around thoughts around context.
Yeah, so certainly an invitation to the group to come in with questions. But Andy, I wonder if you could just explain a little bit about where those concepts come from. Are they like national concepts that are kind of accepted in different situations? Are they unique to sport? Are they unique to your coach developer program?
No, they're concepts that have been heavily embedded in the New Zealand, I guess New Zealand society for a long period of time, John. To be fair, I'd say a lot of them had diminished over years, and they're coming back really, really strong across our school system, our education system, our government system. So we have a treaty signed 1842, which basically talks about how the English and the Maori, the natives to New Zealand, will work together for partnership, participation and protection. And every organization that's particularly aligned to government has a right to ensure that the treaty principles are upheld. So it's something that that we've been really cognizant of as we build our coach developer program, to make sure that those principles are embedded in what we do.
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, having had these discussions with you in the past, I've tried to think from a Canadian perspective how that fits. And so I can do the kind of analysis of some of the Canadian cultural aspects. We have the bicultural aspect of English and French, but we also have a very strong native side as well. But interpreting some of that and pulling it into how we deal within our coach developer program and our coaching programs, that's still a puzzle I've yet to figure out.
It's an interesting one, John, because the context may not just be about history and the culture. It may be about ways of working as well, which I guess on some sense is culture. Talking to Masa about Japan and the shifts that Masa's tried to influence around athlete-centered coaching, and you know, just the quantum of time that will take to make that shift because of a culture so ingrained in tradition you know, around hierarchy and around discipline and various things. So I think just taking that time to really understand either your country or your organization's context and culture, where your people are coming from, how they like to work, how they like to learn, and what's important, is time well spent, I believe, if you're building a program. So I can give an example, thinking about international federations. So if that's a national organization, think about an international federation. And being the government body for your whole sport or organization across the world, and then thinking about how do you dip and dive into different countries. So I've seen examples of some pretty staunch federations, international federations, for example, sending down 180 point PowerPoint slides to a country in the Pacific Islands who not only may not have the technology, it's a country that's steeped in learning through talking and doing. And to think that you're going to have people sit through a 180-point PowerPoint slide just isn't going to cut the mustard. So really understanding how you might, from I guess an international perspective, how you might still have quality assurance around your product and your, you know, and your assessments, while allowing that empowerment and flexibility of countries to be able to operate and understand their people. And I guess that's what it comes down to, is understand your people.
Some very interesting comments and very positive comments in the chat around really respecting the culture and looking at your history and your culture. So thanks for that, Andy. And maybe we could move on to section 2.
So moving into section 2, which is really around our New Zealand journey. Where did it all start? Well, it started for us back about 2010, and I'll put a little roadmap on here for people to work through, and I'll talk to this. In 2010, back in the organisation I worked for, Sport New Zealand, was called Spark, Sport and Recreation New Zealand. So we've been through a name change since then. But we commissioned the best of the best educators across the country to pull together a series of online modules. So they developed Woe to Go, all the different packages that leaders thought were important around facilitating workshops, leadership, communication skills, fantastic content. And it was a big project, and it went on for about 6 to 8 months in development. And then the modules went online for all of our NSO partners, so national sport partners, to be able to pick up and roll out and deliver. And at the time, it was identified that in New Zealand, we were doing a pretty poor job of supporting and developing coaches. It was ad hoc, and a better system needed to be put in place for the generalized training of coaches. So the online modules were up and running in about 2010. And then in about late 2012, early 2013, after a number of reviews, there was one final piece of work done around, really the question was, why aren't NSOs moving forward? Why aren't they impacting? Why hasn't coach developer training changed as a result of putting quality materials online? And the bottom line was basically that the partners didn't have the capability of people to be able to deliver the material. So what we had was in essence, a workforce that was expert coaches with very little expertise in delivering adult learning, very little expertise in understanding how to run quality, facilitate quality learning opportunities for coaches, both in a classroom and supporting them in the field. And the feedback was, as the National Agency for Sport, our partners would like Sport New Zealand to take a lead and build something that can help raise the capability of the national workforce. So in 2013, presentation to Sport New Zealand board, we needed funding. So now my now boss went and presented and released some funding to start to build a workforce. And over the next sort of year or so into 2014, we spent time, and this would be a message to everyone considering around how you may start. Real big lesson for us was take time to understand what's already out there. So we went and visited back then it was called the IRB, International Rugby Board, I think now World Rugby. We attended one of their 3-day coach developer courses. They were considered, as we reached out around the world, they were considered one of the better organizations in terms of their approach to adult learning. We looked across other areas around who is doing great work in adult support and training. So we did a benchmarking exercise, what countries, what organizations are doing well. At that stage, International Hockey had embarked on some work in the space as well. And of course, the ICCE and Penny had started some work. So that work of the ICCE was really integral as well in terms of how we started to shape our thinking. The next point is Sport New Zealand reached out. They decided at the time they didn't have the expertise in-house. So they reached out and identified a group of trainers and they selected 4 of them who became basically the group that designed and implemented the initial phases of our coach developer program. So those 4 people went away, took all of this knowledge, went to the IRB course, and then spent 3 days pulling all the information together, bringing in our New Zealand culture and context, and designed our very first course, which was a 3-day coach developer course, and it was launched in June of 2014. Not sure exactly, I know people ask us all the time, not sure exactly why we landed on 3 days. We, in essence, went through what we believed was important aspects of the coach developer, mapped it out, and for some reason we landed on 3 days. So no rocket science behind the length of the time. We launched that program to our NSO partners, and again, a real key point of difference here is that we didn't open the first course to those people that were coach developers, those people supporting coaches. We intentionally opened the first course to national system leaders, those people that were influential inside their organizations, that could influence decision makers, that could essentially open up finances to start to develop and support their coaches. So we got influence in that first course, and it was almost like a proof of concept type scenario where we wanted them walking away glowing about how good the course was, so that they could go back to their organizations and encourage more to come on board. We, over that year, delivered another 3 courses, and then into 2015, we delivered another 3. What we found, unplanned for really, we hadn't done the thinking behind this, so this was a major insight for us in 2015, is that our then partners, the national sports, and we have another system partner in New Zealand called Regional Sports Trusts that are more like a generic organization scattered across the country. We have 14 of them. Because of the popularity of the course, what started to happen is that they wanted to engage and develop their own programs, which was great on one hand, because this whole concept of coach developer and adult learning and the new approach to this was starting to grow and build, but we weren't ready for that shift. And we hadn't done the thinking behind what does that look like as our partners start to go out and implement this. So a number went off and started to toil and through this same challenge as we did, and got off the ground. And And what it quickly raised for us was this issue around, well, if our partners are going to deliver, there's going to be a need for them to have quality people that deliver to coach developers. So the trainers concept was developed in New Zealand. And in 2017, through a need of, we've got a number of people out delivering courses to coach developers that need support. We almost organically landed on, we need to support those trainers. So we launched the Sport New Zealand Trailers pilot. Over the next 2 years, we had about 40 to 50 trainers come through that program, and we're still supporting those trainers. And we, through the, I guess, the support of those trainers and the capability build of those trainers, in 2018, we actually made the move to, for Sport New Zealand, to move away from delivering our 3-day courses to actually more of a focus on supporting those people that are leading and building the system. So now in terms of delivery, Sport New Zealand works only with the training of trainers, and we have a network of trainers across the country of about 60 trainers who work across national sports and regional sports trusts. So a big shift for us in 2018. Again, not a planned, not a sit down 3 years ago, what does the plan look like? More of organic, responding to the system as the system grows and expands itself. So delivering to the system as opposed to designing to the system. And then obviously this year we've hit 2020 in COVID and the impact that's had on our system. So at the moment, obviously there was a massive upsurge in online support, and our partners did an outstanding job of maintaining momentum through there. So we're about to get back into it, and our first national partner course is set to be delivered in about 1 month's time. So that's sort of our, yep, sorry, I was just going to finish, and this is a question.
Yeah, maybe we could, if you could just go back to the timeline. There were a few questions there, Andy.
Great. I'm not seeing the questions come through, so if you can help me with the questions, John, that'd be good.
Yeah, so Cam was asking right back at the beginning in 2010, was there a trigger event that prompted that development? The development of those online modules?
Yeah, really good question, Cam. What had happened probably 2 or 3 years prior to the trigger of the online modules was that there was quite a shift in our system, and a big piece of work done on athlete-centered coaching and the needs of athletes. And inside that, what started to unfold was some key pieces of work around, I guess, the needs of coaches to be able to deliver athlete-centered coaching. So some of the modules that started to come up were around coach communication, coach planning, what is athlete-centered coaching, athlete growth and development. So it started with the needs of the athletes. And then what came out of that is that the way that we're developing coaches was pretty much an old transmission of bringing an expert in to a room and sharing what they do in their coaching practice, which had really little relevance to the modules that coaches really needed to know and practice. So at that point, I wasn't on board, but my clear understanding is that the way that we're developing coaches needs to shift. And there was a project pulled together around bringing the best educators from universities together to design these modules that would make an impact to coach development. So that was the trigger point. It was actually based on a shift in athletes' needs and that conversation around what is athlete-centered coaching.
Good. first of all, there's no trouble with sharing the slides with the
Absolutely
cohort.
not. No.
If we could just for a minute go down to 2014, and you mentioned that you didn't have the expertise in-house, so you identified a group of 4 trainers.
Mm-hmm.
Were they from outside of sport? Where did they come from?
Good question. So the 4 trainers, one came from the university system, so from Canterbury University in South Island. One actually came who was the key lead in that course I spoke to about World Rugby. He was the key national lead and the key coaching manager for New Zealand Rugby at the time. He now works for Sport New Zealand, so he came on as a lead trainer. I was invited on as a trainer, and I worked for, I've mentioned the Regional Sports Trust, RSTs. I was working for an RST, and the 4th and final person that came on was also working for a Regional Sports Trust at the time. So we had a mix of tertiary, NSO and Regional Sports Trust trainers that came on board. Of those trainers, and that was probably another important insight for us, is that we kept that training group. In fact, all of the training group are still delivering trainer support, but we kept that trainer group tight for at least 3 years before we started to shift and allow other people to come in and deliver on the course. So there was a continuum of the same trainers for about 2.5 to 3 years on our course. And we think that was a pretty important thing in terms of establishing the quality assurance of the course.
Good. And there's just a few other questions about certifying the coach developers and partnering with universities in the program.
Great. That's another really good one. So one of the, we grappled with this. I've mentioned this in some of the insights. This was a real, I use the word grapple, hopefully everyone understands it. This was a real struggle for New Zealand in our system. So both from a cultural perspective, so one of the, as I talked through those cultural concepts that are really important around connection and around shared learning, one of the points that started to emerge is that we're a country that really values ongoing continuous learning. And we're also a system in New Zealand that doesn't have a lot of extra resource to spend on assessment and compliance. So initially we started down the assessment and compliance. Our first course was actually assessment course, and we had a lot of negative feedback from the participants around a belief around ongoing continuous learning and support, and then having a checklist and assessment. And I appreciate assessment comes in many shapes or forms. But one of the things that we slowly moved away from is we invested more and more time in what does ongoing learning and support look like, and moved away from a focus on accreditation and assessment. So in terms of our New Zealand programs, our Sport New Zealand program is not an assessed or accredited program. We have a massive influence on, once you're in the network, and we'll do everything we can to support you. And we have a goal of building people to drive their own learning, but we moved away from a focus on assessment and accreditation, which again, we believe fits our context, and we appreciate it may not be the same for others.
Super, thanks, Andy.
Probably a couple of other points just to note. When we first started the course in 2014, we did have a real strong, we call them mental models in our program, others would call them beliefs maybe, or values. We had a real strong program or concept around ongoing continuous learning and reflection and support. So we had initiatives set up as part of our ongoing support following the 3-day courses. Once you've been through the course and completed the course, you join our National Coach Developer Network and you become part of our whānau, our family. And we initially provided mentoring, one-to-one mentoring support in the program. We had some massive learnings from that early on, in that we didn't quite have it set up appropriately to support people, and probably wasn't effective as what it needed to be. We've learned a lot from there and shifted it around. It was probably more a geographical challenge than anything else. The other piece that we've continued to do is that once you're in the network, you're always receiving communication from us, and we run a number of ongoing professional development opportunities. And you're also open to, which was another big mental model around collaboration. You're also open to join other organizations, networking and PD opportunities as well. So it's not uncommon in New Zealand for one sport, say tennis, to be running a coach developer day, and coaches attend from rugby or netball or cricket. And that's been a real strength, I think, and I'll share it towards the end of our program, is that sense of collaboration across our partners. Were there any other questions that came out in that section, John? Might have lost you there. I'll keep moving on. I'll just share. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's just a question on numbers, and you're coming to that next. So,
perfect. Yeah. Okay, so this is a ballpark stab at our system as we sit in New Zealand currently, and I'll explain a little bit more to this. So we have approximately 300,000 coaches in New Zealand. I would say 95% of those coaches, or close to it, are community volunteer coaches. So I'll let you do the figures on that. So not a whole lot of professional full-time coaches in New Zealand. Of those 300 coaches, they're supported with a network of around about 600 coach developers. Now, I was doing some figures just before this presentation. Sport New Zealand has trained approximately 250 of that workforce. So they are coach developers that have come through our unique 3-day program and have been part of our network for the past 5 years or so. And the remaining of those have been trained through our partners over the last 2 to 3 years. So a real surge in coach developer training and support from our partners over the last couple of years. And that's actually been maybe one of the challenges in terms of planning a system as well. I'll talk a little bit about that towards the end. We now have, and this is, as I mentioned, Sport New Zealand's focus currently, we have a group of 60 coach developer trainers. I'll talk just briefly about the role of coach developer trainers and some of the, I guess, key points we're finding around trainer versus coach developer. In New Zealand, a trainer can be someone who whose role is purely to deliver support to coach developers in form of workshop or mentoring support, but they could also have added on to their role the responsibility for system design and impact measurement and the financial side of their system as well, or that could be a separate role in itself. So our coach developer trainers are quite a broad group of system leaders across our national partners and into our regional sports trust network. And that's the group that we're spending quite a bit of time on supporting and building their capability. And this year, in 2020, late this year, we'll launch an 18-month bespoke trainers program, which is will take probably 12 to 16 of this group and tailor our individual development plan and provide support for that group to really raise the levels of those trainers. One of the things, again, we are finding unplanned, but probably not surprising, is that the role of the coach, developer, trainer has some quite distinctive and different aspects to the role of the coach developer. And these are things that we're starting to find through an action learning approach. We're testing and applying and receiving feedback, and the role is quite different. The trainer's role has a lot more influence, behavior change, presenting up to senior management than it does have, and design than that of a coach developer. Does it answer the question of the workforce, John? Is there anything coming through? Just have a look here.
Just the trainers themselves, would they wouldn't be full-time trainers, they would have other jobs.
Yeah, it's quite a mix. Many of these trainers will be full-time trainers.
Working for
National bodies,
okay,
for national sporting organizations, or for the regional sports trust network. Many of them will have coach, developer, trainer as part of their another role. They might have a sport development role. I would say all the 60 are employed in the sports system.
Yes.
All 60 have come through the coach developer residential program. So they've all been coach developers before they've moved into trainers roles. Yeah, that's.
And what about the prerequisites for entry? Like, what are you looking for in terms of who you want to be your trainers?
Yeah. So you've actually segued into the next pieces, John. But great question. We the trainers, in terms of impact and influence in the system, we're actually realizing that the trainers have the greatest impact in our system at the moment. So some of them end up in their role by default, so they're employed by an organization. But more and more, we're getting opportunities to sit on those interview panels. And we're obviously looking for people who are first and foremost understanding of New Zealand context. We're after people who can understand systems and how to build them and analyze gaps and see opportunities. We're after people with real self-awareness, so empathy and understanding, and we're after people with strong leadership. So it's a critical role in our system.
Great, thank you.
We're actually doing a piece of work at the moment, which is future thinking around, and I know the ICC are doing something similar, John, around scoping some trainers standards that we're looking to build into our system. Okay. Can we move forward? I might have frozen here. There we go. So section 3, insights to actions. What are some of our key insights, and I guess what are the things we did well, and what are we learning along the way? The first one, which is probably no-brainer, but a lot of talk about online content and opportunities. Well, the one thing that we learned is that the content itself in isolation from actually developing the people piece had really little impact in our system. So we really went for 3 years without any significant change until that point where our partners said, we need help. Can you take some leadership in this space? So that was probably a really big insight. So if you're thinking, about building a system, really grapple with that or struggle through that question around which comes first. And I think if we had our way again, we would definitely start to develop the people and then build the content behind or alongside that. certainly wouldn't build the content up front and then go the other way. We lost a lot of traction in that space. I've said this before, but understand your context. And we're still learning, even in New Zealand, our context. We're learning that we now have a system of 600 coach developers who are operating at different levels. And the support a coach developer needs at a national level is very distinctly different to the support a coach developer needs at community and club level. So we are working through the future of, we will have different coach developer opportunities and programs running for different coach developers in different contexts as well. So really big point for us. Culturally, what's important for you as you build your program. Proof of concept's really important. If you're starting something out, is test it first, and if you can, test it with influencers, people that can go out and be advocates for you, and people that can go out and actually have the opportunity to influence others inside their organization. Be really clear and as much as you can, stick to your guiding principles. I've talked about some of our guiding principles around continuous learning. Action learning was a big one for us, in that our courses changed subtly over time as we responded to feedback, and as we wanted to do things a little bit different. So we're prepared to test things and shift them. Another really strong guiding principle for us was around collaboration. So that's been a strength in our program. We sit back pretty excited to see things like a coach developer from rugby actually running a tennis coach developer course. And in a couple of weeks, we've got 2 sports, volleyball and netball, partnering up, sharing trainers, sharing coach developers. So we've got a system that's really built on a mental model of collaboration, and we think that's a real strength in the system. Have robust reflection and feedback loops. We spend a lot of time inviting people into our camp. We had a lot of international visitors in the first few years. So we had visits from Penny, from England. We had Jean Chambray, who's one of the mentors on this program. Jean and one of his colleagues came in. We've had visits from Japan as well, Singapore, I think. We might have had JR over. We've had a number of Australian partners in, and really the only thing we ask them to do is, well, 2 things. 1, participate in the course, and 2, give us a little report at the end of it around what you saw, and some points for us to consider. And those visitors have really helped shape our thinking. We've published a couple of articles which have helped us through our thinking, and we've engaged with university groups to come in and observe and provide some feedback around our approaches to adult learning and what they're seeing and how that stacks up against the evidence and research. On top of that, we've had some pretty, and again, John, I'm happy to share any of this with the groups. We've had some pretty robust trainer reflection processes, and we've also had some really good feedback loops from participants on the course and how that's impacted on them. My final point around what we learn, and this is a really big one for us, this is something we didn't do well, is we didn't take the time to map out our system. We got excited and we went gung-ho. We got this concept of coach developer going, and it became a massive buzz in sport in New Zealand. Everyone was talking about it. It was the revolution that would change our system, and we just kept going and going and going. And like I say, 600 is probably under representing our workforce. It's probably getting closer to 800 or 900. And we really didn't spend the time mapping out, where do we need people? What skills do we need? At what level? How many trainers do we need? What's the quality of trainers we need? What are the competencies we need in that? So if I had my way again, I would certainly go back and spend more time early in mapping out the system. And I think that would have really helped us maybe speed things up, but maybe be a lot more efficient and impactful in the way that we're doing things.
Super. Can we go?
Maybe just stop there, John, and take a couple of questions before.
Can we go back to the first course you had? Because you made the point again here about influencers. And you mentioned in your first course, you didn't really have coach developers go to it. You had the system leaders.
Correct.
So you were able to get them to commit to coming for 3 days. And did you teach them what a coach developer needs, or did you have it a more general experience?
Yeah, we basically took them through, and a lot of the first course was to test our thinking as well, right? Because this is the first time we'd ever had a go at it. So we basically took the first group through what we believed was the right way of running this 3-day course for participants coming on. And we wanted their feedback around what they're hearing, what they're doing, and do they think it would have an impact on their coaching systems if their key people came through this type of support and training. And that was the concept. And clearly the concept worked very, very well. I think you also asked the question of how we selected the coach developers. We over 4 years have always been oversubscribed for applicants into the program. We have never had to chase for applicants into the program. And I put that first course and the people on it down as a massive influencer for that, in terms of they were the people that went back and said, we need to build this in our programs. And word of mouth has been massive for us in terms of people wanting to come onto the program. So we've had every course, 6 months before the course, we'd have a wait list of coach developers to come onto the course. And we were very particular, probably for our first 8 to 10 courses, John, in being very selective of who came on. So they had to fill out some requirements around their experience, what they believed ongoing learning was. Really, did they match our mental models for the program? What they believed adult learning was, and how they've experienced good and bad opportunities. And then our selection criteria revolved around, first and foremost, do you do coach development? And if you do, move on to the next step. And then through a series of questions, and then we made sure we had a balance in our programs of obviously gender, geographical, and also we were quite particular in making sure the group, and going back to those cultural elements of whanaungatanga, we made a real special effort to make sure we had groups that came together and could build together. And many of those first groups of cohorts, similar to the NCDA program, are still connecting 5-6 years on.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Be wonderful if you could share some of those kind of criteria and processes.
Absolutely. We can work out a way to get information across. Like I say, I'm happy to share anything that that we've got that could be useful.
Super.
Okay. So where to from here in 2020? So I mentioned this, but we're moving into a bespoke trainers program, and we're going to select a group, and it's going to be an 18-month learning and development program. And one of the areas we're looking to do is actually broaden wider than coaching. So we have, as my role depicts, we have a sport development system in New Zealand that covers areas such as coaching, but it also covers officials. It also covers what we would class as system leaders, people responsible for competition structures and the game in general, or the sport in general. We have quite a big network starting to develop in New Zealand around parent education as well. So we're looking to take our trainer development into other areas, and that'll be a new test and learn for us. Big piece of work around NSO system mapping. So we want our national sports to be a lot more systematic around who is in the system, where the gaps are and where they need to focus on. We're doing a piece of work on some national trainer standards, and again, happy to share our work, and the ICC have been really influential in that thinking. And we've got a longitudinal impact project study that started a little over 12 months ago. So I can share a little bit on those ones. So let me just start with the longitudinal study. So we are at the point where we're starting to ask ourselves some questions around impact. And this is always, you get to the point after so many years where the big bosses are after that. The bottom line is this program having an impact on participants out in the community? So that's sort of three questions that we're starting to work on at the moment. There'll be more that fall out. So is the philosophy that we talked about, some of the principles that I've shared with you today, are they in the program, and what makes them unique to New Zealand compared to other countries? Are the principles being supported and endorsed as we grow our program and start to empower our partners to deliver coach developer training? And then the big question for us is the impact. What's the impact it's having on? The big buzzword for us in New Zealand is around positive experiences or quality experiences for lifelong connection and relationship to sport and recreation. So we've got a collaboration across 6 universities working on this impact study, and about 1 year into it, again, I can share these findings. But the way that we're approaching this, another New Zealand concept called whakapapa, which is basically your family tree. And we've tiered our coach developer system family tree into 5 tiers, starting from the originators of the program right through to the early adopters, and then through the trainer program, the coach developer program, through to the coaches, and then ultimately down to the athletes. So this is a real long-term study, and we've just finished the first component. So tier 1's been done and is currently being written up. So that's a piece of future focus work for us. And then I mentioned about the NSO mapping. So I just share a quick case study of a real highlight for us, I guess, in how an NSO national sport's gone about this. So this sport is netball. For those that don't know netball, it's similar to basketball, except you're not allowed to bounce the ball. Predominantly our largest female sport in New Zealand. So this system leader, Tammy, actually came through the NCDA program. And I guess the case study goes something like, this is a young leader that came into a national role, surprisingly young. We put a lot of support around Tammy. She had some outstanding capabilities, and we put a lot of investment into building and supporting her. She's just grown and really taken a growth lens to her role, and done an outstanding job to collaborate with others and learn and grow. Coupled with that, there's been a real strong, so netball has a real strong focus on coach developer and building the capability across the country. They've done some outstanding work in starting to track their system, and that's helping to identify gaps and opportunities. And I guess of all sports, and it's probably down to Tammy, is a real leader now across other sports. So currently Tammy's working with the sport of volleyball, which is a sort of emerging sport in terms of the coach developer space for us. And Tammy's taken a real leadership role with them and helping them build their coach developer program. So in terms of what sort of stuff are they mapping, again, I can share this, but basically what Tammy and her team have done is gone across the country to compare player numbers to coach developer numbers, and then coaches to coach developers and the ratio, and then coach developers to trainers and the ratio. And what they've been able to do through this is start to come up with a bit of a system approach to working out, well, probably the scenario is for every players, about every 11 or 12 players, we need a coach. So when that's not the case, we need to do some work on our coaching, upskilling our coaches and getting more and recruiting them. For our coach developers, they've worked out a ratio of about 1:50. So you can see in some situations here, if we took, this is the second piece down, the North region, coaches to coach developers is 1:21:1. So they got some work to do there. And then they've also mapped out trainers to coaches. So this is, it seems like rocket science, but this is pretty simple work that is really helping an organization shift and help their partners to work out where is the critical areas that you need to work on. So this is part of the system work that we'll be working with our partners on to get a lot deeper into this, to help them focus on the real key priorities. I guess just in summarizing that, as I was diving through and thinking about if I was to sum up the New Zealand system and what's critical for us, then that was a lovely little quote there from Karen Eagle that I'll just leave people with before I answer any final questions, John.
Excellent.
John, can I come back to the point around assessment? There's one area I probably didn't cover. One of the pieces of work we did do, I wouldn't say around assessment, but around lifelong learning and self-reflection, is we developed a tool that we called the Coach Developer Learning Tool. And essentially what it was, for those that are familiar with the Dreyfus skill learning model, we spent about 4 or 5 months with a group of sort of system leaders, mapping out what we believed at the time were the key competencies of a coach developer. And then we sort of put that across a matrix and gave it some definitions from almost, and used the novice to expert type thing. But the tool was primarily used as a self-reflection and peer feedback tool. And that tool is still quite relevant today. It's quite well used in the system. Again, I will more than happy to share that tool with everyone and encourage them to adapt and adopt whatever might suit their context.
Super. Yeah, no, that's great. You've shifted from a 3-day trainer course to an 18-month trainer course. That's quite a jump.
Yeah. Our trainers course was never 3 days. Our trainers course was piloted, and we did it over a year. So our coach developer training course, the induction course is a 3-day course, and then we don't have a finishing time on our coach developer program, because we believe once you're in, you're in. But what we do is run a series of what we call just professional development learning opportunities throughout the year, where if you're in the network, you'll be invited to those. Our trainers program has always been a little bit more in-depth and intense. So across a 12-month course, we'll centralize the group. So the way that we piloted last year is we actually broke the country up into 4, and we had 4 sub-programs running. And those groups would come in their regions. They'd come together about once a month, and then they'd come together centrally twice for 3 days. So they came together for 6 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a similar model for the 18 months?
Slightly different in terms of one of the real big insights from our training program were catalysts for shifting some thinking and learning across the group was being quite tight on individual learning development plans and having the right support to help people actually implement those. So we're going to spend a lot more time in that space individually with trainers, and probably not so much bringing them together.
So in terms of the role of the trainer, they're delivering the coach developer training courses.
Yes.
But then how much time are they spending with the coach developers? So are there any examples or expectations in terms of that relationship?
Yep. So that could vary, or that varies a little on their role, John, but that could vary from I'm in weekly contact with my coach developers to I might see them once a month, to I have a number of courses run throughout the year. Each of our partners is a little bit different.
Sure.
So some of the bigger sports have say a full-time trainer and full-time coach developers. So for example, the sport of netball across the country has 5 full-time coach developers who they've called their coach leads, who work in the regions across the country. And then Tammy, as the trainer, is responsible for supporting them.
And what about online training? Are you using online training, and if so, how?
Great question. We've currently started a workforce looking into our response to online learning. COVID certainly pushed us down this avenue a little bit more. We had dabbled in it to no great success, but we're currently looking at a project around understanding, and I guess the question is, what does an online blended learning context look like for New Zealand? So we're currently doing a piece of work on that.
And there's just another question about mentoring.
Yes.
Is that specific, or is it just inherent in the coach developer training, and how does that happen?
Yeah, great question. One of the I guess insights or a really good learning for us in our program was that the original way we set up mentoring didn't work, and we think a lot of it was down to geographical differences. Is that we may have had a mentor in one part of the country and a mentee in another, and at the time not being able to connect face to face seemed to be an obstacle. I'm not sure that's the real challenge, but that was for us at the time. Now the mentor part of it is included as ongoing training as part of our program. So we spend actually more time understanding the role of mentoring, how they can support, and it is a very generic mentoring approach we take.
And that's in the coach developer training level.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Even more detailed in the trainers programs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, can I open it up? If anybody else wants to put on their mic and ask other questions, please feel free to do so. We just got a couple of minutes left.
Andy, great presentation. Always fascinating to hear what you guys are up to. For those systems that, you know, obviously don't have the resources, the people, the money to take these giant steps, what are one or two things that you think, you know, would be practical to get this kind of culture shift moving?
First of all, I'd sort of say that to that, Cam, often we use resource as an obstacle to get things going. So it doesn't take a lot to bring some people around a campfire and have a conversation around, how could we get things started here? How could we start something small? I think sometimes the size of things are often a barrier. How could we get a few influential people around the campfire, have a conversation around what's important to us, and test some thinking, and from that get a little proof of concept, and then start to build from there. The one thing I'd say that we learned though is at some point take stock of that as it's growing before it grows too fast, and start to do some system thinking. But I'm not sure it comes down to having a whole lot of resource, because we certainly didn't have a whole lot of resource to do this. A lot of our, again, no one asked the question and I forgot to put it in. A lot of our programs have been self-funding through participants paying to come on. So it's been a bit of a partnership. So there was some money that went into it, but everyone that came onto our coach developer course paid a fee to come on. Well, Cam?
That's really helpful. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Andy. That's great.
Andy, I've got a question for you about system design.
Troy, thank you.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the way that you have applied systems thinking concepts around the development, and you indicated that was one of your reflections, was that you thought that you didn't take enough of a systems approach to development of your system, but at the same time you've developed the ability to be nimble and agile in response throughout. And so yeah. I guess this is a tie into the last one, because you talked about the systems being and resources being an inhibitor of, or an excuse for people not to do it. But really, I think one of the things you talked about was the systems learning that takes place because of mental models and of establishing a shared vision through creation of mental models. So how have you integrated that shared mental model, or the ability to discuss mental models about what coach development should be across the NSOs, so that there is a consistency?
Yeah, I guess we've been really fortunate. It's a great question, Troy, because almost contradicted myself, didn't I? But I think you're right in that the mental model we had about being agile, and I'll share some of this. I'll share the mental models we had. We had some strong mental models around being agile, testing, and being brave enough to stretch ourselves. I guess the point that from my learning I took is that we maybe missed a question to ourselves around, and we maybe got a little excited about the noise and kept going and going and going, then only to realize that many of the coach developers we trained may not even be in operation, because we trained so many of them that we might not have the need for them. So it's just probably asking ourselves, we spent so much time on getting the training and the course right that we maybe missed. So when you're talking about a coach developer system, as we know, there's other elements to it. And we maybe missed a question or two along the way around the broader system piece, and got so tight on building the best quality coach developer learning experience that we could. So just lifting up our heads a little bit maybe, and looking at the clouds and saying, what are the other questions that we might need to pose ourselves at particular times? I don't know whether it would have changed anything. We may have kept going down the same avenue, but maybe it did. In terms of how do we get the mental models shared across the NSOs, that sort of goes back to that piece. I guess we've always been strong as a system before Coach Developer came in around. We've had 4 what we call beliefs or mental models in place that go back to about 2008. Our national coaching strategy around continuous learning, around coaches as leaders, around collaboration, and around athlete-centered coaching. And they were the bedrocks initially of how we built our coach developer program. And then as some of the mental models or beliefs of the coach developer started to embed, that's where I think we did do it right, in terms of we took all of our national partners through the program first and almost got them to tick it to say, yeah, I'm on board with this. And once we got through that point, I think we had that shift that we needed. You know, you talk about the tipping point. Once we had the first couple of cohorts through of national sports, and that they were across and they were influential people in their organization, we got to that tipping point where it just became, I guess, norm, part of what we do. And these are the beliefs that we hold on to. So if I walk in now to any national sport delivering their own coach developer program, I should, and I hope, and I do see strong mental models being played out that are similar to those early days when we think back.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think there must be some cultural influence too, because it sounds as if within New Zealand, the concept of being able to suspend your mental models for discussion and conversation to create shared vision seems to be a big part of the cultural context as well. I think that could be a challenge in other cultures where it's not quite that open, right?
Yeah, I agree, Troy. I don't know what it is. It's certainly, you know, they were a little bit like the Kiwi bird with no wings, doing things differently. There are some things that, you know, we have our challenges, but one thing that I do think is a bonus for us is that, and whether it's a cultural history thing, is that we seem to be able to get around that campfire and put our differences aside, put our own personal mental models aside, if we can see a bigger purpose. And that was really integral to us, is to sell the bigger purpose. And in the early days, everything linked back to, I guess, the drive for, hey, we're losing athletes from programs. We need to shift things. We need to train coaches differently, and we need you to be part of this bigger purpose. And it stemmed from there.
John, is there time for me to make a quick comment?
That's my good friend, Gene.
Please do, Gene.
Hi, Andy. I had the absolute pleasure of watching a course in 2016 and was absolutely blown out of the water by the course. What is absolutely fascinating when you watch these guys in action is that real emphasis on people over content. And you saw it not only with the trainers. So one of the trainers would do something, and then after that you would see the other trainers get together and talk about it. And then you saw during the in-between times, the trainers with the CDs continuing the discussion and supporting and helping and asking. And then I was over there with a guy from the Sports Commission, and we were welcomed into the review meetings in the evening, and just absolutely made to feel welcome in terms of reviewing the day and the course. The other thing that jumped out was that emphasis on learning and development and support over assessment just absolutely stood out. And I think there's a huge, huge lesson for us right across the world in that. I was enormously impressed by that. And then the other thing was, and I'll just stop on this, there were no PowerPoints. It was about people. And there was a bit of paper, but it was just on a table over at the side. So we weren't reading through stuff and ticking boxes and doing all of that. We were engaged in these human interactions. And as I say, it was an absolutely wonderful experience, and no doubt it's even advanced and gone on further from that, but was just great to be there.
Thanks, Gene. Appreciate that. And if anyone, Gene, the report that you chappies wrote for us was, and you know the impact it had, it was really significant in our thinking and helped us shift. And I guess that goes back to the point of that we were prepared to shift things. We've always had this belief around adapting to participants' needs, and the feedback that we received from people that came into our environment was really significant, and Gene was no exception to that. Gene, you might talk about culture. You may remember, here's another one for the group. You may remember the point, we had a session on one of the evenings, and I've lost your colleague's name.
Kevin Thompson.
Kevin was sitting on the top of it was a social event, but Kevin was sitting on the top of the table. I don't know if you can remember this. And we went across and said to Kevin, hey, you might have noticed a few people staring at you. In New Zealand culture, you don't sit on top of the tables because that's where food's served. And he did nothing wrong, but he had no idea. But that's how important that context and culture was in terms of this program.
I absolutely remember that. In fact, I may have been guilty myself.
Yeah, I bet Kevin remembers it too. Thanks for that, Gene. I think it's time to wrap up. So if I could just close things off, but thanks, Andy. It's been great to hear all of this, the sequence of the activities, the learning, the direction you're going in the future. I mean, lots of really good lessons for us all as we all work on our own context and our own systems. So thanks a lot for that. And also thanks to all the participants and for your questions. Much appreciated.
Thanks, John. Thanks to the NCDA and to all the candidates. Welcome. And what I'd say is, what an outstanding group of mentors that you've been able to pull together, John. So congratulations on. There's the big boss. And massive congratulations for the group of mentors that you've been able to pull together. What an outstanding group, and I'm sure as a cohort you'll learn and grow with each other. So really looking forward, if there are other opportunities to tap in and hear about your success, I'd love to be involved on your journey as you go. So good luck to everyone.
Super. Thanks, Andy. We'll definitely be in touch.
Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks,
Bye.
JB. Thanks, Marza.
Okay.